Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City of Universal City, Texas. It is Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. I'll call this meeting to order now at 6:30 p.m. and call for a quorum check, please.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Here.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Here.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Here.
Councilmember Najarian.
We'll discuss it in a moment.
Councilmember Shelby.
Here.
Councilmember Volle.
Here. Quorum is present. We shall proceed. The invocation this evening will be given by Councilmember Goolsby. I'll lead us in the pledges afterwards. Would everyone please stand?
Please bow. My Lord, my God, we ask that you be with us tonight as we deliberate the items before us. We ask that you allow us a spirit of camaraderie, that all we want is for the betterment of our city, the betterment of our citizens. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day that you've given us. I could do without the oak pollen, but somebody else might need it. Lord, be with our first responders, our military, and their families. In your name, amen.
Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
honor
the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Wow, thank you everyone for attending this evening. We really appreciate your participation in your city council. The first item we have this evening is to vote to consider the excuse of one of our council members. Councilmember Najarian unfortunately has a family issue that he could not possibly be here at the meeting tonight, so he respectfully declines that.
Second.
Councilmember Maxwell, second by Councilmember Goolsby. Any discussion? All right, Kristen, call the bill, please.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Motion passes. That divided, for your information, that's something we need to do as a council in case one of our members is absent, is to give a reason why that individual is absent. Because if they are absent at least 3 straight times, there's potential for some litigation, and so we want to make sure we do that. So that's why, if you want to know why we do that, that's the reason. Okay. Very special moment. This is why I have been such a fan of what I can do to recognize special people in our community. And tonight this is no exception. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to talk to her right before her so she doesn't have to get up. But we have a person this evening who has been supportive of our community for many, many, many years. But she happens to be 103 years old today. Her name is Dot Roberts, and before I read the proclamation for her, I did a little research. You know who celebrates his birthday with you today as well? Quite a few celebrities, but one of them, maybe you had a little heartthrob for years and years ago. Spencer Tracy.
You're going to have to speak up. This old lady doesn't hear me.
You remember Spencer Tracy?
I think so.
Same birthday.
Is that right?
Same birthday. Okay.
Well, I'm a little older.
You know your
than him.
birthstone is a diamond?
Yes, I do.
How about your birth flower?
I don't know.
It's a sweet pea.
Oh, how
Which is
neat. Yeah,
for love.
that's me.
Okay. And yours was called The Greatest Generation?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And how about this? Here's one for you. It's only been 37,621 days since your first birthday.
It has.
Only
That many?
37,600
Oh, God,
something
that
days.
makes me old, doesn't it?
Listen, ladies and gentlemen, this lady has really been supportive of us for many, many years, and I want to read this little proclamation and give it to her. It's just our way of saying thank you for all the wonderful, wonderful work that you've done for us, and you've had a beautiful life, and we're really privileged that you've had a lot of that life with us.
Well, I've grown with Universal City.
Yes, ma'am. We love you. We love you.
And the library.
Yes, ma'am. Honoring Dot Roberts on this 103rd birthday. Whereas Dot Roberts will be honored by friends and relatives in celebration of her 133rd birthday and on April 5th, 2022. Whereas Dot Roberts is a valued resident of Universal City and should be honored for her 103 years on Earth, right? And whereas Dot Roberts was instrumental in the creation of the Friends of the Library in Universal City and remains faithful in her support of that organization and the Universal City Public Library. And whereas Dot Roberts' long life is a reward for the people and the community that she has so diligently serviced. And whereas Dot Roberts has lived during the most eventful century of this nation's history, and has been a model and inspiration to her family and to those who have known her. Now therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Universal City, Texas, I do proclaim April 5th, 2022 as Dot Roberts Day in the city of Universal City. And on behalf of the City Council and citizens of our city, I offer sincere congratulations and best wishes to Mrs. Dot Roberts for many more happy days and years in the future to share with family and friends. In witness, therefore, I do set my hand on this 5th day of April, 2022. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And happy birthday.
Flowers are beautiful and all the cards and stuff. It really means a lot.
Well,
It really does, John.
We can't tell you how happy we are to have had you as part of our family
You
for
don't
all
know
these
how
years.
happy I am to be part of UC.
Well, we're glad you're still with us. You are an example of longevity that we will all hope to be able to maintain someday if we possibly
Well,
could.
yes, but don't use everything I do as an example, okay?
We love you, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
And we fully know, ma'am, if you need to go, absolutely, not a problem whatsoever. Okay, so let's move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. It's under tab number 8. There are 2 items under that, and all matters listed under the item are considered to be routine by council and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. So we have 2 items. Does anyone want to have one of those removed, Mr.?
I'd like to pull item B for one quick question.
Okay. All right, let's vote on item A first, then we'll open up for item B. So that's consider the minutes of the Tuesday, March 15, 2022 City Council regular meeting. Move for approval. Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Neville. Second by Councilmember Maxwell. Any discussion? All right, call for the vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Okay, that motion passes. So we'll move on to that tab A, item number B, which Councilmember Goolsby asked us to consider separately. That's an ordinance 662A 2022. It's an ordinance amending ordinance 662 and approving the First Amendment to the agreement with UC40 LLC Texas to program economic incentives for public project enhancements, development standards, emergency services, and correlated infrastructure relating to the development of the civil crossing single-family subdivision in Universal City, providing for an open meeting and establishing a savings clause and an effective date. This is our second reading. Fair?
Oh, thank you, sir. I just saw one aspect in the song, the 4-foot wide sidewalk. Do we have any idea what the length of that sidewalk is? For ADA concerns is what I'm looking for.
Oh, I'm sorry, Randy's. Well, it should run the width of the road all the way down to what you call the second house. But remember that the city is also adding a parking lot a little further down to give people access to the area. They're asking on the Kitty Hawk Road project, the 4-foot sidewalk, what is from where to where?
So it's on one side on the resident, let me see. It's on the, let's call it the north side of Kitty Hawk, and it is 4-foot sidewalk.
Okay, my only concern is that you can only go so long before I have to have a 5-foot turnaround space. I didn't see anything about that in the minutes. I just want to make sure that we have that accounted for in the engineering.
Sure, we can look at that.
That's all.
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Mayor.
Okay. All right. So this is a separate item we need to address at the moment, so I will need a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Goolsby, second by Councilmember Shelby. Any further discussion? All right, Chris, call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Our next item this evening is our citizens to be heard, and I'm extremely pleased. There are 12 of you that have signed up this evening again to address council. I think this is fabulous. We appreciate this. We've been asking for it for a long time and hoping that you all would want to participate in this, and we're really thrilled that this is going to happen this evening. So again, you can see this is time provided for citizens to address council on issues or concerns. It's informative only. We will not have any special discussion on the issues. And I ask you to please try to limit your comments this evening to 3 minutes, because we do have 12 of you initially that have signed up. So, and I'll call you up in the order that you signed up this evening. First person was Ms. Ashton Bowman.
Ashton Bowman, 120807 El Dorado. I have children ages 17, 14, and 9. I homeschool all 3 of my children. My kids love to walk to CVS or Four Kings to get a cookie around lunchtime. I was shocked when I saw tab D on the agenda stating they cannot be out in public from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. My first phone call was to the police chief, who happens to be here tonight, so thanks for chatting with me.
You bet.
I asked to get all the stats on truancy from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. He told me the police department does not keep records of any of that, and that it all goes through Judson ISD. As we all know, Judson ISD goes through several cities, so there is no way to get stats on truancy for just Universal City. I asked him about this whole ordinance, and he said it is rarely something they enforce, and the likelihood of my kids being stopped is probably not high, since he believes all his police officers should use common sense. Now, if my kids were graffitiing the CVS, as a police officer would stop them. However, ordinance or not, the police have the right to stop any child committing a crime. You might think, well, if they don't really enforce it, why care if it's in the ordinance? Well, the police chief on the same phone call told me that he recently let go 7 officers who were not good apples. Ordinance like this give the very, very few bad apples a chance to stop kids who are doing no wrong and give them a negative interaction with police officers. So why then even have that section of the ordinance at all? The agenda packet gives 0 crime stats, no truancy statistics, nothing. Since the city doesn't have stats of truancy or juvenile crime from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., I can tell you who does. The Texas Homeschool Coalition has looked into these daytime curfews. They have found that the curfews do not reduce crime. In some areas, truancy increased after daytime curfews were adopted. Police can rarely provide data to show a correlation between truancy and crime statistics, and curfews are often enforced in minority areas more than in other areas. Since the council members do not have stats or any other proof, I don't understand how you can vote on an ordinance that primarily affects homeschoolers without proper data. I realize this ordinance has been in place since 2004. However, I was not living here then, and this is the first time I was made aware of it. Since you are voting to re-adopt this ordinance, I think it's the perfect time to change the ordinance before just rubber stamping it like we have been doing for years. I'm asking you tonight to vote to amend the 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. curfew by getting rid of it altogether. Thank you.
Okay, the next individual signed this evening, Mr. Phil Vaughn. Name and address again for the record, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Phil Vaughn, 2801 Universal City Boulevard. I came here tonight to give you feedback on a couple of agenda items. First one is tab D, which is the curfew. I know it's, as Ashton said, it's been on the books since 2004, but it is being reauthorized tonight. I'm not a big fan of curfews in general, but I understand the overnight, and I can get the argument for it. But the 9 to 2, I think, is a little bit inconsiderate of our homeschool parents. I also think it diminishes the parental rights if they want to teach their children to be responsible, like a 15-year-old to walk to a store to buy some supplies that they would not be allowed to do that under this ordinance. So I also ask that you please strike the 9 to 2 timeframe from that curfew as you're adopting it tonight. And then tab G is the codes that you're going to be updating. And I printed out a little, just 2 sheets of some of the ones that I was concerned about. Do you have it? No. Okay. Unfortunately, I think I failed miserably on the font size, so hopefully it's legible. But I wanted to go briefly through some of the ones that I was particularly concerned about. One of them is the property maintenance code, which talks about The International Code recommends that the building official have reasonable cause to request entry to a building if they think that there's a code violation. And the city's version wants to take out the requirement to have reasonable cause. It just says the code official is authorized to enter. And then if the property owner refuses entry, then the building code official, all they have to do is get an administrative search warrant, which my understanding, which could be wrong, I would hope that you would ask this question to determine what is administrative search warrant. But I believe that's just the municipal court judge would be able to sign off on that. Another particular issue is in that same property maintenance code, the International Code has no definition for what an unsafe building is, but the city wants to put in a definition of an unsafe building, and they have several caveats of what would be considered unsafe. And one of those in particular, which is item 8, says, quote, any building, structure, or portion thereof that is in such condition as to constitute a public nuisance. And so I don't know who gets to decide what the public nuisance is or what that determination would be, but I think it's a little bit too loosely defined. And I don't know what this homeowner's recourse would be if someone came and said, you're a public nuisance, how they would be able to either, I guess, what the appeal process would be to try to undo that. In the plumbing code as well, as you probably know, the city's been requiring us to take our backflow prevention devices and put them out of the ground instead of burying them, and so now they're exposed. And so now it's apparently a freezing risk, and so the city wants to require a hot box enclosure, which, looking into what these are, they're extremely expensive. I have one of these out of the ground. It's actually on the north side of my building. I had no problems last year with the freeze with my $10 insulated sock that goes over it. So I would ask that you not consider requiring something that's so expensive for something that's not really a public safety risk. You know, if that breaks and there's water on my yard, it's really on me. It's not going to harm anyone. Another issue in the plumbing code is there's an outright ban the city wants to have on water heaters in attics. I wouldn't want a water heater in my attic, but the International Code does provide safety rules that if you meet those rules, you could have one in your attic, but the city just wants to outright ban it. I don't think that would be in our best interest. And then lastly, in the fire code, there's two particular provisions where the fire marshal can turn off your utilities in his sole discretion when there's any fire hazard is permitted to continue. And any fire hazard is considered, I think, is too broad. So even if it's just a minor fire hazard, there's no implication for what would be significant enough to automatically turn off, my utilities. And I think there should be some other consideration that the city maybe be a double check, maybe if the city manager also had to approve that before we go that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Next individual assigned this evening is Mr. Richard Edwards.
Richard Edwards, 209 Tree Lane. Good evening, everyone. We're talking a lot about regulations and all these permits, and it's really on everyone's mind. And I've got my own considerations about some of them, but one that sticks out, first of all, thank you for having someone actually go through and proof all these ordinances you're looking at tonight. There was one error that I didn't even notice that got corrected, and I appreciate that. But the one issue about weeds reducing their length from 12 inches to 10 inches, I don't get that. I don't see how that's a fire hazard. I don't see how, whatever the cause is, what I think it is just adding a little bit more burden onto the people who live here. I mean, I don't want my grass getting up 6 inches, much less 10, but going from 12 to 10, I don't get it. Other than that, I'd like to say that I went to the Attorney General's website and I viewed the Open Meetings Act, did the little tutorial, got my certificate. I even spoke with one of the attorneys at the Attorney General's office yesterday, and the idea that I offered up at the candidate forum about council members sitting down in a group session and talking issues, taking questions back and forth. He said not only is that perfectly fine, but you can even talk about current agenda items there, as long as there's no quorum present. And if it was only one council member each month, he didn't see how that would ever become a problem. And something else I asked him, and I know this might be a little bit off the wall for some, but especially like tonight's agenda, there's so much to it. And there's those of us, we're finding out, okay, what are you looking into? What are you looking into? Because we've got so much to reference and try to figure out. But then, really the first time we have to come up here and address it with our representatives is here tonight, where you're not allowed to actually discuss the matter with us. You're going to discuss it among yourselves, and then you're going to vote on it. I would suggest, instead of the agenda being published on the Friday before the council meeting, which is one day more than is required by law, thank you very much, I would like it to be published the Friday after the council meeting. This would give council members and the public too, 2 weekends and 6 days to not only go through and see everything if they've got a question, but then they can contact the representatives and hash it out with them. And regardless of if anybody wants to change anything or they would vote a different way, the people who are interested, they would know that they had a say, they had a talk. Because I think after the candidate forum, that's more information than I've gotten all the time I've come up here to these council meetings. And I felt good about what I learned. And I think everybody would feel a lot better if, as things come up, as we're concerned about them, we can have back and forth. We have time to think, see what's going on. We have our back and forth. And we know that we're cared about. That's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, next individual signed up this evening is Sabine Matum. Is that the correct name?
Sabina Robinson.
No, it's all right.
Well, no, it says Matum right
That's
here.
enough. Yes, sir, you're right.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Williams, City Council, Mrs. Turner. My name is Sabina Mado, 8611 Marathon. I'm here before you this evening to voice my opinion about the enclosures for the backflow prevention pipes. Years ago, the backflow prevention pipes were buried underground and therefore were protected from freezing weather. Then the rules changed, and now they have to be above ground, and freezing becomes a risk. Not only are the pipes above ground now, they also have to be inspected on a yearly basis. Property owner has to pay for that. But do we really need a hot box enclosure around the pipes? Hot box enclosures are very expensive and most likely have to be installed by a plumber and/or electrician. Those pipes can be covered with insulated material, the same way we cover our outside faucets during freezing weather. You can go online and order a backflow pipe cover. They come in different sizes, colors, and price ranges. Personally, that's what I did to protect our pipes, and it worked out just fine. If the uncovered pipes that the city mandated years ago have caused an issue with the city, please explain the problem. The backflow pipes are on private property, not city property. If there is a freeze and it needs to be repaired, then it's up to the property owner to do that. So it only makes sense that you protect those pipes with covers, not hot boxes. Universal City mandated that the pipes have to be above ground. Even so, very few actually are. And now the city wants to mandate that the pipes have to be covered. Why? I oppose this very much and recommend that this will not be approved by the City Council. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. Next individual this evening is Mr. John Everling.
Good job.
Thank you.
Nothing particularly controversial. I just came tonight to brag on my students. This Saturday they painted another 20 fire hydrants, bringing their total to 55. There are about 640 hydrants in the city. Randy Linsman was kind enough to give me a map, so I actually counted them all. And our goal is to do as many as possible, so keep your eyes open for bright, shiny fire hydrants.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it very much. Okay, next individual, Colonel Jim Vinci.
Hey, don't start plugging it. By the way, I know they do Ukraine colors in reverse because I didn't have yellow and
thank you very much I'm going to read this. Usually I'm extemporaneously speaking, but I want to make sure I cover all the points. I want to thank you, Mayor and Councilman, for allowing me to talk about the issue here, which I'm up to address, and that is about the highly restrictive international codes. Most on the dais know me. I've lived here for 36 years. I've been on the zoning board, the Board of Adjustments and Board of Appeals multiple times. So I've kind of paid my dues to the extent that you guys are paying your dues, and you too, and thank you very much. But I want to present the concerns here because I think that it's important that I talk to you, that you hear from us, and I'll talk about that in a minute, so we don't have the same debacle that we had with the garbage cans. I mean, that's just been a real issue. I won't go into that, but that's been an issue. But I'm hoping that I can convince you to do something tonight that will prevent that from happening again. You know, at the candidate forum, Councilman Adjournment unfortunately is not here, Councilman Volle, Mayor Williams, you all agreed on the importance of us to come here and to tell you what's on our minds, because you wanted to hear us. You wanted to hear what we had to say so that you could govern properly, so that you could consider all that. Well, the mantra during that time was, we need to listen more to the citizens. I wrote that down. We need to do a better job in that regard. Councilman Goolsby we had dinner, Matt Mateko and I had dinner with him in December, and he said the same thing. Councilman Maxwell, we talked about that informally, and I want to thank you, Governor Maxwell, Councilman Maxwell, because Councilman Maxwell, thank you very much for thank you very much for supporting us and what the citizens are asking. I think you've done that in the past for us, and we thank you very much for doing that. So I've raised concerns about the codes with all of you, and I've sent emails to all of you, and I've given handouts to all of you. Unfortunately, I only heard back from two. I've heard back from the mayor, and I've heard back from Councilman Goolsby. I haven't heard any of that. I haven't heard back from you. Now, maybe you didn't get it, but I can assure you that I sent the emails. And what I did, not only did I send it once, I sent it twice, plus we even have a copy of it in front of you. But nobody's responded. Now, I don't mean to be rude here, but is this some kind of a paradoxical incident, or is this something that fell through? If you want to hear from us, then please respond to us. Have a dialogue with us. I asked for that. We have restrictive codes. They discourage contractors, subs, and tradesmen from wanting to do business in Universal City. We need to substantially reform and simplify UC codes, not make them even more burdensome on residents. I personally have had several trades that would not come out and do work for you. Mr. Mayor, Chair, and Councilman, I mean, my time is out, but I would suggest, I have a lot of other things to talk about. The time has run out, but I would suggest that you table this until you learn more information, because there's a lot of information there that is not correct. And I'll have to point out one point, in that one of the things it says, and I talked to today to the code folks, and they said, you know, you have to have, somebody brought up that you have to have your backflow valve above ground. And I did some research, and I have that information. I sent you an email on that this afternoon. The law does not say that. The Texas law does not say that. I want to make sure you understand, because that's being told us that that's what the Texas law says. It doesn't. I sent you that email. I have cited it. It doesn't say that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but don't say that we have to do it because of Texas law. That it's up to the individual. We're all adults, folks. We don't need to have a parent. We're all adults and citizens in the room. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I went over.
That's an estimate for time. We try to keep it as close as we can. So, okay, next individual this evening, Kim Ward. Sound right? Pardon?
Is that me?
Kim Eigelhart. Yes.
There you
I
go.
see it. That's
Oh,
your.
you can't recognize my name by now.
No, I can't, man. To be honest with you, I
You
really
haven't
can't.
took hieroglyphics.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Kim Eigelhart. I still reside at 736 Garden Meadow Drive. One word that came up a few times in the candidate forum last week and came up tonight is rubber stamp. So today I'd like to talk about the three distinct branches of government here in Universal City. It's the first of what will be a multi-part presentation. Section 1.02 of the city charter reads in part, all powers of the city shall be exercised in the manner prescribed by this amended charter. As a reminder, the city charter is the municipal equivalent of a constitution. That is, it is that document by which we the people give the city the right to exercise authority over us. The city council, tasked with enacting legislation and determining policies, is the municipal equivalent of the state legislature or the U.S. Congress, except like Nebraska, it is unicameral. The city manager, tasked with the execution of laws and the administration of the government, is the executive branch, although it is an appointed rather than elected position. Moving on to the judicial branch, section 5.04 of the city charter provides for the appointment of a municipal judge. Section 701 and 702 of the city charter establish the Planning and Zoning Commission as well as the Board of Adjustments. Each is to consist of 5 or more members, quote, as determined and appointed by the city council from among the qualified voters of the city, end quote. Per section 702, the Board of Adjustment shall be responsible for, among other things, hearing appeals from alleged errors by any administrative official of the city in accordance with substantive and procedural rules to be prescribed in ordinances of the city. According to the city website, both Planning and Zoning and the Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial bodies. This is clear when looking at the duties of the BOA, which, as stated above, includes passing judgment on the actions of administrative officials. And there you have it, the executive branch or the city manager, legislative branch or the city council, and the judicial branch, including the city judge, Board of Adjustment, and the Planning and Zoning Commission. The legislative branch is elected by we the people, and they in turn appoint the members of the other two branches. Thank you. And right quick, I want to thank all of y'all that attended and participated at the forum last week. I want to thank Mr. Heberling, who was a great moderator, Jennifer on the stop sign, Anthony and AJ on video production, and everybody that helped with setup and cleanup. It was really appreciated. Thank you all for that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I might really mess up this next one because I unfortunately cannot read the name here, but it's 129 Plaza Drive. Seriously, I cannot read the name of the individual that signed up here. I really truly can't.
I've got a couple of items I'd like to discuss. First of all, how often do you folks go out and tour the city? Look at the streets and conditions of the areas?
Sir, would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Correct, Fraga.
Fraga? Okay, thank you, sir.
And my other question is, I was told by code compliance, I checked on when the trees would be trimmed. And it said it was no longer the city's responsibility, it was my responsibility. When that became effective, I don't know when. But they said that because of the alley was split in half. This side was mine, this side was across the street. Well, the damn trees are all on this side. Nothing but oak trees. And I checked with the insurance, and of course, the trees are so large that I'm afraid that with these storms we've been having lately, they come down on my neighbor's yard. So I'm having our tree service come by Thursday and start trimming them down. but it's almost like going to refinance your house to get that thing done. I've already had it done twice. So, I don't know if that's a new director that came in here or why, but how they decided that split the alley and this half is yours and this half. With the new trash can procedures, there's no longer any traffic or waste management go through there. So, but, all right, different subject. Have we given any thought to relocating that post office to another area in the city? That thing's been there since 1960, but it's getting where people they don't like to walk down the end of the few parking slots. They'll park blocking the street, you can't go anywhere on the boulevard. So, you know, that's very aggravating. Also, a lot of these streets now need striping. People just don't have an idea of where the middle of it is, and they're always on your side as you're coming down the road meeting them. Another thing was that went to pay my water bill, and they asked, I think, for my social security number. Why? Why do you need my social security number? They told me, well, in case somebody wants to come and check or pay on your bill. You know, that's hard to believe. But I don't know why you would need on my water bill. It's not gonna decrease the bill or decrease it, but to me, that information is mine only. I'll give it to you when you need it for a valid reason, and not just because the bill now requires that. So if you would look into that, let's see what it is. And that's about it. Like I said, the other one is just how often you can get out and look at the city, and also the post office, maybe relocate them. Because I notice we have signs throughout the city, all or lots for sale, all or a portion of the lots. I'm just curious if we sold anything of those lots. Because I've been here since '65, and really, we've let these little churches come by, and you ought to see the amount of acreage they have for their church. And they're not talking about mega church population. It's only like maybe 50, 30 cars. But the population, the acreage is just humongous. I've known people come here on businesses, and they can't do anything because of the church restrictions. You can't open up a business because it violates their rights on that. So if you would look into that and see what we've done about that. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Fryer. I can answer one of your statements related to the post office. Unfortunately, we have no control over that whatsoever. It's not a universal city function. So as far as relocation, we'll take that into consideration, but it's nothing we can do about it.
Because I'm looking at the area, at the new Walmart. I don't know who's got that area between Walmart and the church. But it looks like it's pretty big that could handle something like that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. All right, next individual this evening, Mr. Stephen Buck.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Stephen Buck. I live at 8603 Phoenix Avenue. I've prepared remarks this evening rather than speaking extemporaneously. That should tell you I'm concerned about the topics on which I'm about to speak. Several items on the agenda this evening cause me a bit of concern. The CPS rate hike in tab C is an entire page of one chart that raises our gas rates by up to about 10%, depending on whether you're a residential or a business customer. I wish to read a few portions of that resolution from tab C that evening. Whereas the application of increase rates by center point is complex, the city suspends whereas the application is complex, the city suspends the requested effective date by center point for 45 days pursuant to the authority granted the city under the Texas Utilities Code in order to review the data and calculations that provide the basis for the rate increase application, end quote. The rate hike is summarized on a single page. I compare this, however, to the agenda item at tab G, the proposal to repeal all the building and safety codes for Universal City and replace them with the International Building and Inspection Code, related to such things as electric, plumbing, sewer, lighting, ventilation, fire safety, rights of entry by the code enforcer, the right of the fire chief to disconnect utility services in the event of a fire hazard. I shudder at the number of possible differences between the current codes for Universal City and the codes from the International Code Council. Has anyone looked code by code, an honest question, right? Has anybody looked code by code and standard by standard to determine what changes will have to be made by residents if these codes are adopted? If someone has If someone has and it comes out during, if someone has and if they have gone code by code and it comes out tonight during the discussion, I withdraw the point. But if a resident makes a small repair or renovation, will that trigger a requirement to expand the scope of their renovation to include an unrelated item in the house in order to bring it up to code? I feel we need an independent review to determine what differences would exist between the current codes and the new ones, if adopted, and what would be the impact to the residents. I feel this is a topic for a special session of City Council, not a routine meeting. The entirety of tab C on the agenda, the CPS rate increase, is 6 pages. If that's too complex to approve tonight, how can you approve tab G, the code adoption that is 33 pages long and is a topic, I don't mean this as a personal attack, but statement of fact, many of you are not familiar with building codes and inspection procedures and stuff like that. Unless the review has been completed and you are satisfied the impact to residents will be minimal, please table this issue and direct the city manager to order an independent study of the impacts. As I've been knocking on doors the last few weeks, residents have overwhelmingly voiced frustration with the permitting and inspection process. I hope you wish to retain the trust of the residents you represent. Please, I hope you've done your due diligence in reviewing all of this and look seriously at the impact your vote might have on them tonight. One last thing in the 2 seconds I have. As I've been knocking on doors, I was over in Orchard Park last night. Everybody that opened their door believed that they live in shirts. They do not. I tried to explain that it used to belong to shirts, but now we bought it and then it's being developed and give it some time. But I assured them all, those street signs that are up there that say Universal City on them, they say Universal City for a reason. Thanks everybody, have a great evening.
Next individual, Mr. Caleb Schaefer. Schaefer?
I'm sorry. You're going back. Okay, I'm sorry.
You want to do one last thing for her? You want to sing happy birthday to her?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Happy birthday,
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear God. Happy birthday to you.
Mr. Schaefer?
Caleb Schaefer, live at 106 Granada. Know most of you, went to high school with some of you. But I wanted to discuss tonight. First of all, I want to piggyback on the other gentleman on the international building codes. Not a fan of those at all. Would like to see something else done with them, but that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here to talk about the tab B pertaining specifically to my children. I've done my fair share to populate Universal City. I've got 6 children, 6 boys to be exact. I know how mischievous they can be. I know the trouble they can be. And I believe it's my responsibility as a parent to take care of my children. I don't believe it's the city's responsibility or the police department's responsibility to check on my children when they're walking down the street to find out if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. If they're out causing trouble, vandalizing, getting in fights, whatever, I have no issue with them being stopped and corrected. But otherwise, just walking down the street, that's my position, that's my job, that's not the city's, and that's not the police department to check up on my children. I personally have seen in the last couple of years far too much of a government overreach in many aspects of life. I think a lot of folks have seen that, and you're seeing a greater turnout tonight in people speaking up because of that very situation. I've also seen in my direct family overreach of the law enforcement. I understand not all law enforcement is bad, but I also understand that not all law enforcement is good, and they don't always make the right decisions. And I don't want them having the opportunity to give my kids a hard time, or harass them, or give them misinformation because they're walking down the street and it's a restriction of movements that frankly I believe is unconstitutional. If I allow my child to walk down the street at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, that's my business. That's not the state's, it's not the city's, it's not the police's. That's my business. And I don't believe I should have my rights and my children's rights infringed by being stopped and checked by the police department. I think that's all I'm going to say tonight. don't want to get myself into trouble. And I don't want to offend the police department. I think they do a great job. I think they're undervalued in a lot of areas. But this area is my children. And I'm a homeschool dad. My children are out doing things at all hours of the day, and I just don't need them to have any extra troubles that they don't need. So thank you, and y'all have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay, the last individual signing up this evening is Jason Nelson.
How you doing, Mayor? Jason Nelson with 202 Volle, and I just wanted to say I don't know if the city council had anything to do with the new trash ordinance, the trash cans or anything, but I just want to say thank you. I really enjoy it. With the free trash cans, I think it's going to save a lot of trash blowing around the city, because I've seen multiple times just trash cans knocked over by animals or people that don't bag their trash and just dump it in and it blows all over the city. So I just want to say thank you for that. If y'all had anything to do with it, or if it was just waste management, but we appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
And my 4-year-old granddaughter would like the splash pad open today.
She's got to wait 9 more days. 9 more days. Okay. Those are all the individuals that actually signed up this evening. Did anyone else want to address council that did not get a chance to fill out the form?
I did, sir, but I take it a little bit, I'm a little bit concerned when
Mr. Vissi?
No, when someone spoke, when Mr. Buck spoke about codes and not sure if everybody knew about the codes, was a little disappointing when Mr. Goolsby took his code books and threw them down on the counter. I didn't think that was necessary.
Anyone else want to address council? Did not have the opportunity? Okay, again, thank you very much for all your input. It's very valuable to us. We've said this for years. We really appreciate your involvement. Definitely appreciate your involvement. Okay, so we'll move on to our business this evening, tab number B, which is to discuss and consider Resolution 896B 2022. It's a resolution of the City of Universal City, Texas, authorizing the filing of a grant application with the Byrd County Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Program Year 2022 for an infrastructure construction grant, authorizing Kim Turner, City Manager, to act on behalf of the city in all matters related to the application, and pledging that if a grant is received, the City of Universal City will comply with the grant requirements of the CDBG grant. Ms. Turner?
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, Universal City has been working in the community development block grant applications for many, many years. And as part of that, each year we have to adopt or re-adopt this resolution so that we can continue to participate.
Any discussion, any questions of Ms. Turner on this issue? Yes, Ms. Mayor.
Ms. Turner, over the past few years, what's the average amount of grants that we have received?
On average, I would say about $300,000 a year, some years a little bit more. So what happens when the federal government puts out the CDBG funding to all of the counties around the nation, the pile of money changes from year to year. Well, on average, we've been receiving about $300,000 a year. We would like more, and in some years we haven't been selected, but if we don't make the submittal, we don't stand a chance at all.
So this is one of those situations that we don't ask, we don't get?
Correct.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion made by Councilmember Maxwell, second by Councilmember Shelby. Any further discussion? And I'll just call for the vote then, please, Chris.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
And motion passes. Let me just, again, some of you are fairly new this evening, for maybe the first time you've joined us, that the Community Development Block Grant is administered by the county, and we put in our requests to them every year, and we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to the county for being as supportive as they've been for us for well over 15 years. And with the services with the projects that we've been able to complete, we could have never, ever done without the county support. So if you see Commissioner Calvert, thank him very much, or Judge Wolf, thank him very much. All right, next item, tab number C. Discuss and consider Resolution 878B 2022. It's a resolution by the City of Universal City regarding the application of CenterPoint Energy Resource Corp. South Texas Division to increase rates under the Gas Reliability Infrastructure Program, suspending CenterPoint's proposed effective date for 45 days, authorizing the city's continued participation in a coalition of cities known as the Alliance of CenterPoint Municipalities, and determining that the meeting at which the resolution was adopted complied with the Texas Open Meetings Act, making such other findings and provisions related to the subject and declaring an effective date. Ms. Turner?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is regarding the Gas Reliability and Infrastructure Program. GRIP, as it's normally called, allows for gas companies to get a return on their expenditures, and the way they do that is through a rate adjustment. So I appreciate the compliment that I managed to get it all down into 6 pages, but it is a very voluminous document. And because it is voluminous, the Coalition of Cities usually hires a law firm which has a lot of data analysts on it. And what we do is we ask them to go through there and verify all the data that was within that document to make sure that the calculations and the data presented to us is fair to the residents throughout South Texas. So with this, we are, as part of the Alliance, asking Herrera Law Firm and Associates to be our representative and to go through the data and to represent us at the hearings that will oversee the GRIP program. So I just need council's approval to move forward with that.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Councilmember Goolsby, second by Councilmember Shelby. Discussion.
Yeah.
Goolsby.
I just want to point out that, yes, part of the city has CenterPoint and part of the city has CPS, correct?
Correct. Everybody has CPS Electric, but CenterPoint Energy and CPS Energy are the gas providers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the same that we did a few years ago. Every time they've come to us with this rate hike, this is the same situation that we're going to go through, because that, I remember that year specifically because it was a rate hike and it ended up being a decrease whenever it came back. It fell in, I'm pretty sure.
So there's several kinds of rate adjustments they can do. One is like normally what you would see with the consumer price index or whatever that happens to be. This is a little bit different in that it is them getting the return on their capital expenditures or in their investments and their pipelines and everything else. So on the other one, we don't have any say on, we just kind of have to go over and take it. This is the one that we actually get the chance to go in and look at the data to make sure it's correct so that it's fair and equitable to all the members of the coalition.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Chief Maxwell.
Who actually receives the dividends? Is it CenterPoint that receives the dividends on their infrastructure, on the interest?
Do they give us, I'm sorry.
So the rate increase, who benefits from the rate increase? CenterPoint?
Oh, yes, sir, CenterPoint Energy.
So what would happen if we disapprove this?
If you disapproved it and didn't become part of the coalition to look at the data and the calculations, then it would just go in effect without having been examined. But remember, we're only one of many.
Yes. What would happen if everybody disapproved it?
Then it would go, if everybody disapproved it, well, you don't have a choice to disapprove it. You only have a choice to have it looked at. It's not an approval or disapproval. The only thing you're approving is to have the law firm go in and look at the data on our behalf.
Copy.
Which usually runs us to the tune of about $1,200. Because of the coalition, we split the cost.
Okay, Mr. Shelby.
He answered my questions again.
Thanks.
Everybody stole my question.
Mr. Neville, will you come back to us to vote on it again?
No.
No.
We'll be notified whether or not the data was correct or incorrect, and if it was incorrect, obviously Herrera Law will then come back to us and ask us if we would like to go and have them represent the coalition in the hearings that would take place before the Texas Railroad Commission.
And we have examined this before, this has happened before. We have gone with the group, the coalition, and there have been some changes, there have been some adjustments based on that coalition and the recommendations that have come forth from that. This is our opportunity to express our feelings with the coalition. and we'll see what happens in Austin. We have no control over that, other than to make sure that we are united with the members of the coalition, and that's why we're making this point. Okay? Anybody else, any comments? All right, we have a motion and a second, so let's go ahead and call for the vote then, Chris.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Doesn't matter if I say yes or no, but I'll say no.
Councilmember Maxwell.
I've got a dog in a fight, but I want somebody to make sure that it's run fairly. That's what this is for, so I go aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
Motion passes. That's why the council is taking a strong look at it, representing us. All right, thank you very much. Tab number D, discuss and to consider ordinance 568-F-2022. As you can read, it's an ordinance re-adopting the curfew for minors under 17 years of age to prohibit being in any public place between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., providing an enforcement procedure, establishing criminal penalties for minors and for parents of minors, and adopting certain exceptions, superseding ordinance 568E 2019, and amending Article V, curfew for minors, Section 2-760 through Section 2-763 of the Universal City Code of Ordinances. Accordingly, this is our first reading, so Ms. Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, cities in Texas have the ability to impose curfews on minors at their discretion. This ordinance, if we have one, and some cities do, has to be renewed every 3 years. I can say that we originally adopted this in 2004, moving from the last edition to the current one we have not made any changes. I do want to just point out that there are quite a few conditions and exceptions to the curfew rules to provide for the active nature of teenagers with work at school and other obligations, and that would also include homeschoolers as well. So if you have any questions, myself or Chief Siemens will be happy to answer them for you.
So the question of anybody, Ms. Foley?
When tab D, section 1E, talks about public places, the word parks isn't in it. I would think parks is the biggest part of their mischief place.
I beg your pardon, you're in which section under definitions?
Tab D, section 1.
Section 1E, public place. Okay, yes.
All right, and then it's
Most parks are
public
public
places.
places, yes.
Really should have parks in there.
We could add parks if you'd like.
But I know that's where
I don't know too many people here who have a private park, but we will put park in.
I appreciate it. Okay, that's all.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I didn't call you, but my brother's a police officer. I called him. I asked him a question. I didn't want to bother you. You're busy.
Yeah, never too busy.
He basically, I just asked him, how would he interpret that? And he's like, well, what I see is it just gives the police officer an opportunity to step in if there's not a clear evidence of criminal mischief. He was like, but that's a hard road to figure out. So he's like, I'm not gonna do it. And he's like, I'm gonna wait till I catch him doing something or see him doing something, just because.
That's the spirit of the ordinance, yes, sir, and I would agree with that stance wholeheartedly. In my 20 years, I don't know that it's ever been cited for the daylight curfew. That's why it's not tracked internally, because it doesn't become criminal until we cite for it. However, it is a status offense, meaning a school-aged individual, and truancy is a school district issue. So those are the jurisdictional police departments that would track those numbers. But in 20 years of doing this job, including 7 here, we've never made that contact for that reason or issued a citation to my knowledge. It's usually reserved for those criminal mischief stuff in progress. And by the way, I'd like to just echo CM Turner's statement that Section 3, just to remind the public and council, Section 3 provides for several defenses, most of which have been brought up as concerns tonight. So that should be alleviated when those are taken in and understood, clearly.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Shelby.
I think, Mr. Mayor, I'll just ask the direct question. If we don't enforce it, why do we have it in there? I would imagine there's a reason it's in there, so I'm kind of interested in that. that?
It's for that exact reason that Councilman Goolsby just said. It provides for the opportunity to, if you see something suspicious taking place, for instance, Jordan motor cars have been damaged numerous times recently because of this particular violation. It provides an opportunity for officers to make contact.
So I'm using a good example because I was a kid at one point in the city, and there were neighborhoods being built, and as a child, I did obviously walk around these houses when they were being built. But just being on the property itself is trespassing at that point. Doesn't that qualify to be stopped at that point? Do I need a curfew in addition to the already, basically being on private property? It's not mine.
That is true in that instance where you're on private property. I suppose in the alleyways and stuff, which would be public property, where most of our criminal mischief takes place and occurs when you drive, and you can see it mostly along Balboa and the Coronado lane there. There's some substantial criminal mischief that we're constantly correcting and fixing and pursuing. So in those public areas where it's being occurred.
So without this verbiage in there, you have no ability to inquire about what's going on to that individual?
I would agree with that, certainly. I would agree with that. We have suspicious places and times by the state statute, and I think that's what this is in spirit of. But that doesn't really apply to people just walking down an alleyway. You have to build more than that, which is in the spirit of this ordinance as well. We have to have, as your brother stated, Councilman Goolsby, reason to believe that something nefarious is probably going on before we would initiate contact. But this allows for that.
One more question. Since I know you came over from Castle Hills, does Castle Hills have the same?
Yes, similar. Yes, they did have similar. They amended some of the items in there, and I don't recall exactly what. It was renewed, if I'm not mistaken, about 5 years ago. So my memory escapes me. But I will mention that we had numerous criminal mischief and a subsequent arson fire, a large one that was on KSAT this weekend of a home that was being built in the process, and had officers been on that road at that moment, they would have been able to make contact with those individuals going that direction with the butane lighter and some of those things that lend itself to criminal nature.
Who were juveniles?
Sir?
Who were juveniles?
Yeah, they were juveniles. That is correct. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. And they have to be juveniles as well. So,
Tom, is your time?
I do. I'm giving the time framing here. The midnight to 6 a.m. I understand. That's kind of making common sense. That's a bit. A lot of us have lived in different countries where we've had curfews. But the daylight hours, based on what you just said, had the officers been on the road at the specific time and they had seen the individuals with the butane lighters and things of that nature, they would have. Was there a raging fire back in there would give them indication that there might have been something wrong?
in this instance, there was. But
that would have been sufficient circumstances in order to stop and ask questions.
Sure.
So, do we really need a truancy?
It's a parental thing. I think back in '04 when it was drafted by council and the citizens, that it was parents wanted to be notified if their children were possibly out of school, as I would want to know, because kids do some knuckleheaded things sometimes. But that's a citizen and council driven component of it.
I understand that, and parents probably want to know that. But then that goes back to the school district, though. They're the ones responsible for providing that information.
The Judson ISD or whichever school district, they don't necessarily patrol off the school campus. Now, I will say, near the Kitty Hawk Middle School, there is sometimes a fairly large stream of children going from the school district property to the coffee shop next door, which amazes me, or to QT, and sometimes even as far down as HEB during school hours. But the officer is only responsible for what's happening on campus. They're not necessarily patrolling off campus.
Well, I can understand that.
And the notification might not quite be real time. I think that's where the spirit of the ordinance was drafted in, when it was drafted, was to assist the school districts that can't notify parents real time.
Well, my question then would be, wouldn't it be more effective or just as effective to have a memorandum of agreement between Universal City and the school district? Or that way we provide communication if they have an issue or a concern that there may be some truancy, vacancies, absences that day. to notify us, that would be on the agenda, that you would actually brief on a daily basis, and that would circumvent the need to having this as a ordinance.
So I'm not sure if I have a memorandum, an MOU with ISD, that they would notify us.
Yeah, for truancy, that they have concerns that there may be excess truancy from their school, for their school district, and requesting assistance. That way we'd be having at least some knowledge that there is actually truancy areas versus just, I mean, I'm trying to look at the, I don't have any children in this area, grandchildren that went to school in the local area, but I'm just trying to answer some of the questions. Do we really have a need for this code compliance?
I think so as a parent myself, but that I don't speak for the masses in the city, obviously. So I personally, yes, I would want to be notified by an officer or an entity that my
I'm
child
asking
was
if
out.
you want to be notified. I'm asking, do we need to have a curfew, daytime curfew on the books that says, because if
I'm
your
not sure how else
officer,
I'd be
if your
notified.
officer sees one of a teenager or an adult in a suspicious situation, they have the right to pull over and ask the questions. But just because they happen to be 16 years old and happen to be in an area that's not looking suspicious, you know, is there justifiable?
No, I think it's just to assist the parents with maintaining that their kids are in school or don't skip out or anything. That's all. I think that was the spirit of the ordinance when it was drafted. It may have ran its course for this community.
I don't know. What I'm hearing today, I think it might have run its course. Because I remember in 2004 that we did discuss that. But that might have run its course.
Interesting point. We do have some more discussion still open, so let me go to Neville first.
Yeah, I was just wondering, back when my kids go to school, the rule was that once the child left your door to go to school, they were the property of the school to take care of them until they got back to your door, especially when they went on bus. Now, I think the law is still that your child has to live more than 2 miles from the school in order to get on the bus. It's the same thing. Once your child leaves your door and walks to the corner to get on the bus, from that door until they come back to your door, they're the school's problem.
I think chapter 37 doesn't quite describe it that way, but it is very similar, yes. Bus stop on is in parentis absentee, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I quote that chapter 37 in the Texas Education Code references. I was an SRO briefly. That it does state that it becomes the school's responsibility from the bus stop on. I don't know about between the bus stop and the home, Councilman Neville, but that could very well loosely be applied as well, depending on interpretation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Shelby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a follow-up. I believe this covers year-round, not just during school. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, no, there's an
exception for school.
It just says city between 9 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
No,
So we have an exception, so summer we don't?
Yes, sir.
So how do you handle it during the summer? Because if there's a time when there's going to be more kids out, and that's when I was out getting into trouble. Sure. It was during the summer. I guarantee it. My parents went to work, I was by myself. You can only do so much in your house before you get bored in the 80s because we have 3 channels. And so we went outside.
Yes, sir.
So if you go to section 3, defenses, and you go to the letter I, it talks about the exception to 2B, which is vacations, holidays observed by the school, school equivalency certificates. That's all the exceptions that we're talking about for when school is not in session.
Okay, so if we are not enforcing this when school is not in, and we have a larger population of kids that could be up to nefarious activities, how do we handle it during the summer? What ability do you have to address people who are between, under the age of 18, being in alleys or public places and possibly
Just what Texas statute and any other ordinances we might have that govern criminal aspects. Again, I don't think this was a police mechanism. I think it was a parent mechanism. So I don't really have a horse in this race, so to speak. I don't look at it from a policing mechanism whatsoever. I look at it as a parent mechanism that we just facilitate the mechanism, and that's it.
Yeah, and I want to be extremely clear. I have 2 children, and I hope that if they were out doing something, that you guys had what you needed to do to stop them from doing that and let me know. I appreciate that mentality. I kind of wish in some ways somebody had caught me a little bit more than I was as a child, but there were a lot less police in the city at that time. So I probably wouldn't have stepped on a nail on my foot or tripped on, fell down some stairs that were partially built. There's a lot of stuff that I got into trouble with as a kid that would, I wish that somebody had stopped me. But I think my concern here is if we're not worried about the summer, when we would have more kids out, then why bother putting it in while we're in school? We can use the Texas statute to cover that as well.
Again, I think it's simply for the parent notification. Like I said, there's little police enforcement, or it's not necessarily a police mechanism. So it's entirely up to the citizen, the parents, and council.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this with amending a change of removing the 92 section.
Second. Okay, there's a motion on the floor now, with an amendment to the motion.
Are you saying 92?
The 92 daytime, the 92, we leave the evening.
Subpoint B.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not on the right page to identify it. I will be glad to find that and address it specifically. Yes, section 2, subpoint B. And then any of the, if we have to clear up any definitions anywhere else that are no longer viable because that section is gone.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and the second is by Councilmember Maxwell. Open still to discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was headed exactly where William, my thought was, we have to revisit this every 3 years. In 3 years, if it's a problem, there'll be a group of parents up here that say, hey, come get this back on the books so that my kids can, so somebody else can help police my kids. But we've got parents up here right now that don't want it, so.
Agree.
Thank you for all your information.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with that amendment to remove the 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Is there any other discussion by anybody? You guys are right on, so let's call for the vote then, please.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Very, very good discussion, everyone. All right. Thank you. Let's move on to tab number 8. Consider the preliminary and final acceptance of proposed improvements at the QT 4026 Addition Subdivision to include the sanitary sewer system and public roadways. Ms. Turner.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, sometimes when we have commercial development that's come into place, they do sometimes make public improvements that.
Excuse me, by the way, this was our first reading, so something does come up between now and our next meeting. We can also address that as well. Go ahead.
So periodically we have commercial development that makes public improvements. And in this particular case with the QT, they made some roadway improvements, in particular on Old Commerce Road, and as well as some off-site sanitary sewer improvements. So those improvements have been in place for quite some time, so we have inspected them and they are in good order, so we are ready to approve those and make them public amenities.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Goolsby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So they're asking for the preliminary and final acceptance all at once?
Yeah, we probably could have done the preliminary a year ago. We didn't, but they're still in good working order, so we're gonna go ahead and accept them in their entirety.
So how long, is there a time frame that we have, like almost a warranty on this work?
1 year, the 1 year warranty is passed.
The 1 year warranty is already up?
Yes, they've been, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion and open for more discussion.
Move for approval.
Second, Councilmember Shelby, motion second, right, Neville. Other discussion, anyone? All right, call for that vote, please.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Let's move on to tab F. Consider approval of pay estimate number 6 invoice for the West Byrd Drainage Project Phase 2. Ms. Turner.
Back into the CBDG project process, so as the work continues on, they submit pay invoices. Those invoices have to be approved by city council so that we can get the reimbursement. In this particular case, it's pay estimate number 6. As you will see, there's not much money left on this particular project, so I would anticipate one more invoice for this, and then that project should close out.
Move for approval.
Councilmember Goolsby, motion, second by Councilmember Maxwell. Again, the discussion is this is that CDBG project, and it's to the tune of a little over $108,000. And it's, again, we are indebted of gratitude to our county for supporting this. So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this was different from the one we did the other day, if I remember correctly. Are we on budget on this, Randy?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other? All right, call for the vote then, please, Chris.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
Motion passes. So it used to be called the Parkview Drainage, now it's called the West Byrd. So basically the same project, but it's been going for 15?
Over 20 years.
15 different renditions over 20 years, yeah. Okay, all right, let's move to tab G. Discuss and to consider ordinance 370-P-2022. It's an ordinance repealing ordinance 103-A-04, 324, 324A, 405, 405A, 20. And I'm doing this because we have to put it for the record. 370-J-2013, 370-K-2014, 370-L-2015, 370-M-2015, 370-N-2015, 380-O-2016, codified under the city's Code of Ordinances, Part 4, Chapter 4-6, Articles 2 and to 7, and amending Article 1 to adopt various international codes and dependencies relating to construction and inspection activities, repealing Part 3, Chapter 3-2, litter and weeds in its entirety, and establishing penalties thereto, providing for severability in open meeting, and providing an effective date. First reading.
Thank you, Mayor. So the International Code Council spends years determining best practices and minimum standards for building and fire codes. They have presented their 2021 codes. They change those about every 2 to 3 years. Normally when they do that, we get our code books a year in advance, and yes, we do read through them in quite length, and it takes a lot of time. From there, we go ahead and read the codes and make any adoptions or additions, deletions, or exceptions that we need to do. So here this evening, we have our code officials. That would be your building official, your fire marshal, your fire chief, and also your public works director. And they can answer any questions that you might have to any particular sections of the code.
Okay. Question. Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
Can whomever the appropriate authority be identify the definition, the differences between the international code compliance, Texas code compliance, and United States federal code compliance? What's the difference between them?
So to
And
code
who's the
compliance
ruling, and who would be the ruling authority?
for the ruling authority, well, if we adopted the international codes, that would be the ruling authority.
What's the difference between the 3 different codes then? Doesn't Texas have a code compliance, or, excuse me?
Are you talking property maintenance?
No, I'm talking about the term international code, international code.
That is the ICC.
So does Texas have the equivalent of that? Or is that, because whenever when I hear international, I'm thinking worldwide.
Yes, so the
36
state, excuse me.
I deal with a lot of different contracts in the
Yeah,
past.
the state is on the international, the ICC also, but they're still on the 2012 edition. And they are preparing to adopt the 2018 edition.
So why do we not follow the Texas code?
Because it's the same as this one, we're already under the 2018. They're behind on their best practices and minimum standards. They always have been, since the first time we adopted it.
Including heating boxes.
Okay, let's keep the discussion going before I entertain a motion, so we'll go to Mr. Goolsby.
No, thank you. Y'all know I've got a lot of questions. First off, Mr. Vinci, I appreciate you putting me back in my place, but I want you to know that it was kind of a twofold thing. One, yes, I've been doing a lot of research. Right. And two, Mr. Buck said something that really struck a chord with me, was that this is a whole lot of information all in one big pile. And I'm sitting there thinking, can we not divide it up into sections so that we don't have to stay here till 11 o'clock tonight? All of that. So I do appreciate that, and I'm not supposed to be talking to you like that, but I just want to let you know that I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate you putting me in my place.
No, it's not putting you in place. Thank you.
So that did make me curious if that was something that we could do, and at any time, please feel free to stop me, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start at the beginning of the code for me. And again, guys, I'm sorry. The International Building Code basically has, it updates every 3 years. Every 3 years, the Code Council goes through and does it based off of things that have happened the last 3 years. We have a great big fire in the nightclub. Guess what? Nightclubs now have panic devices on their exits. All of these types of things, and that's why every 3 years it's a good idea to update these codes. So as we get into it, I am bringing this down. In the section 105.2, work exempt from a permit, on mine it is page, it has page number 3 at the bottom. The PDF says it's page 4 of 33. And this happens throughout. And under plumbing, item number 2, clearing stoppages and repairing of leaks. The very last sentence says, provided such repairs do not require the replacement or rearrangement of valves, pipes, or fixtures. It's basically saying that I don't need a permit if certain things happen. I would like to remove the replacement. I don't mind replacing a valve at my house. I don't want to rearrange it. If I have to relocate the valve to somewhere else on the wall, I understand that. But that's one thing I would like to do, is to be able to replace a valve in my bathroom.
So are you on 105.2 under building, the IBC?
It's in both of them, actually. It's in the, this was the International Building Code, yes, ma'am.
That was the plumbing section.
Could you repeat your question?
Basically, under plumbing, item number 2, if replacement or rearrangement of valves, pipes, or fixtures.
You would like to add replacement or rearrangement?
I would like to just remove the replacement.
I want to clarify that this is an exemption from a permit requirement. So if I remove valve, then you will have to get a permit to replace that valve or relocate it.
Everywhere else it tells me that I need to contact the building official.
Okay.
And did I underline the wrong one that you're telling me?
I'm just saying, so this section is basically explaining the work that is exempt from a permit requirement. So if you wanted to replace or relocate a valve, then you would not be required to get a permit for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. A little bit further in here, we'll revisit this one. Because I know I've read it twice. You did the first version the first time we got it, and then I went through it and redid it this time. So on 107.2.1, this is information on construction documents. I did talk with the fire officials. One of their concerns is that it takes a lot of time to go through a commercial set of plans to evaluate the square footage of each room and the life safety of that. Several cities do require architects or designers to put in a life safety plan that basically dictates the square footage of each room, the occupant load of that room, and their travel distance to the exits. This is not an onerous requirement of anybody, and every architect, to keep his seal, should be doing this regardless. So I think if we make it a requirement on a commercial project, that will take a lot of the stress off of the fire reviewer having to go through and do that.
Okay, we can add the addition of a life safety plan.
Okay, thank you. As we continue, change of occupancy. This one was a big concern to me because it basically, if I change the name of my business, I'm staying in my business, but I'm changing the name of my business. It states that I have to get a certificate of occupancy, a new one.
Yes, sir. So.
Just real quick, you'll come through and do a safety review of my building? What does that review of my building consist of?
So it's just to ensure that you're meeting the minimum life, health, safety requirements of the building within the current code standard. I want to clarify that we wouldn't do a building safety walkthrough of the building if the current certificate of occupancy was issued under the current code cycle. So let's say that your certificate of occupancy was issued under the 2015 code cycle. Under this, to date today, which is what we are currently under the 2015 code cycle, we would just ask for an application and so that we can update the emergency contact information for that business. But we wouldn't actually perform a walkthrough of the business. Now, if the certificate of occupancy was issued prior to this current code cycle, we would perform a building safety walkthrough to ensure that it meets the current life, health, safety standards of the building code and the fire code.
Okay, so that's a little different than what I thought I understood. Because if I built a building under the 2018 building code, tonight we passed the 2021 with amendments. And in that it says that a building of 1,500 square feet would have to have a fire suppression system.
New construction only.
That's new construction only. So I fall under, what's it considered?
Non-conforming, non-compliant.
Non-conforming, non-compliant.
Yeah.
So
make you retro those older buildings.
okay, so I have to, what else falls under that non-conforming, non-compliant? Because Jacqueline's telling me I have to bring my building up to the current life safety code. I'm trying to find out where that.
So there's a definition in the existing building code of technically feasible, and it addresses your point. Kim, would you mind handing me the existing building code? Thank you. I'm sorry, technically infeasible is how it's listed here. It's an alteration of a facility that has little likelihood of being accomplished because of the existing structural conditions require the removal or alteration of a load-bearing member that is an essential part of the structural frame, or because an existing physical or site constraints prohibit modification or addition of elements, spaces, or features which are in full and strict compliance with the minimum requirements for new construction which are necessary to provide accessibility. Ultimately, what that means is that we're not asking you to alter your building significantly. We're just asking that you maintain the life, health, safety codes that were part of the construction of the building at the time that it was built, and if there are any new things that might help additionally provide that accessibility or that means of egress, it's not a great burden or a technical infeasibility for that business owner to provide that. So an example of that would be to seal penetrations through ceilings and walls to ensure that you're meeting your smoke envelope of the building, to maintain your self-closing devices and your panic hardware in appropriate working order, to provide appropriate ADA signage, things of that nature that were installed at the time of your building's original construction. We're just ensuring that the property maintenance over the years has been maintained through the years, keeping your building safe for public occupancy.
Excellent, thank you. So just to, since you're standing there, people tell me all the time, she's so hard, or they're so hard, Jacqueline, so big. I had several people recently tell me what a great job you do. So, I'm one of those people that says you're so mean. I'll get there, guys. I'm just scrolling. So we have the one about the property maintenance. I think that's what this one is. This is the property maintenance, and this is the one that talks about the constitutional restrictions on unreasonable search and seizures. This is a tough one. It is rights of entry 105.3. I have it. It shows on page 8 of 33.
Yes.
That's a tough one. Again, I like you, but I don't want you to just show up and start taking stuff out of my office.
Absolutely. This is actually a carryover from the previous adoption of the code. Ultimately, the purpose, or I believe the spirit of this, was to simplify the terminology, because I'm sure you've read that entire section of the code. It's just clarifying the right of entry. It by no means gives us right without probable cause to enter without the authority. So it by no means violates any constitutional rights or state rights that are currently present for any law enforcement or public official enacting their duty.
So if you see something that looks like it is a life safety issue, that's what you go after? Or is it something that, an imminent life safety, or is it just something that you're like, I don't think that's totally great?
If it's a life safety issue, or if it constitutes a public nuisance. The only time that we would ever be entering property or approaching property is to address an outstanding, so in a code enforcement circumstance, an outstanding code violation, such as high weeds and grass, or improper property maintenance, or if it is a severe life, health, safety situation. I will say that a search warrant, much like the police, is a last resort for a code enforcement opportunity. It is, we don't like getting those.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to stop and let somebody else take over, but I would like to come back.
Okay, I would like to offer something for council. This is a very complex issue. We're readdressing it. We've looked at it many, many times. The international code has been adopted. There are many, I think, items that are somewhat controversial in terms of the eyes of some council members and members in our audience as well. I would like for us to consider not even doing anything with this item tonight, not tabling it, because if you table it, you're actually cutting it off. To postpone this for this item, and then I would like to ask for us to consider having a session where council could get a full presentation by the staff on all these issues. So when we bring it back before the citizens and us for action, we've had more opportunity to absorb all this. There's a lot of issues. You can see the size of this. It's enormous. And it's for the best interest of everybody. That's exactly what we're doing here, why we're doing it this evening. It's for our best interest and your best interest. There seems to be some controversy still over some of the issues that have been brought forward by some of your members this evening. I want to take those into consideration. I would like for us to look at that. My personal opinion is I would like for us to consider postponing this item for action tonight and go back and have some sort of a session that maybe we could have between council and staff, whether that be a special meeting. I don't know what it is. I'll work that out with the city manager. And then we can address this again in the very near future. We cannot prolong it for much time, so that's my position, and I continue up the discussion for everybody.
Yeah. There's no no motion right on the table at this point. Regarding this, I would make this motion that we do it, have a session where we can be up to date on all the codes necessary in this. And have a briefing by the city staff, and then bring it back for action.
Okay, there's your motion by Member Neville, second by Councilmember Maxwell. Open again for discussion on that particular motion. Mr. Shelby?
Thank you. Just a quick question. What is our deadline to adopt this?
Whatever.
Well, we've been notifying people that we're reviewing it. There's not a deadline that we've generally given them. And even after we adopt it, we usually give them some time period to get used to it. But in terms of a presentation, we don't have a presentation. We're just here to answer questions.
I think because it's such a complex and huge issue in terms of the numbers and the codes that we're looking at, I think just maybe to have yourself and your staff give us just an overview completely, a little longer than just at the meeting here, where we can address it with, I hope, a little more understanding. That's my thought.
Actually, I just have one more thing on that one. Is there, so I understand this is under one ordinance item, but we're repealing several ordinance items. Is there any way we could break this into smaller chunks to where it could be done over a handful of meetings rather than a marathon session? Can I answer that? No.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Or can I tag on to that?
Sure.
It would be best if we didn't pass them all individually. It'd be best if we agreed on how that would be, each one would be resolved, and then pass them all at once, so that I'm not using the 2021 IDC, the 2018 property maintenance, all those things. If we can hash it all out without approving it at that time.
Review them in chunks then.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there are lots of references in each of the code books to other code books, so you can't really unyarn them because they're very closely knit together. So the IRC, the IBC will reference the IRC, or the IRC will reference the other books back.
But yes, sorry, I like where you're at, because it does help to not do the marathon all at once.
And then I just want to clarify, since I've heard the question you brought up multiple times, the International Building Code is put together by who?
So the International Building Code is put together by a large council. It's actually a open public session that's voted on by over 60,000 people. It's open to the general public, to architects, engineers, contractors, etc. Everyone has the opportunity to weigh in on to the things that are being added to the code. They're actually starting the public commentary for the 2024 code right now. They're doing it currently.
And the percentage of those members that are in the United States?
I don't have it, but roughly I'd say it's probably at least 85 to 90%.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remind you that these books are best practices and minimum standards for construction. It's not the end all. Any contractor can go above and beyond what these do, and a lot of them do when they're doing their building and their design.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second to, as Mr. Neville brought up. Again, the point is whatever you decide to do here, I'll sit down with the city manager and we'll figure out how we proceed from there. So the motion is to postpone this and set up some sort of a session, which we'll do. I'll work that out with the city manager. That's the motion and the second. Any other discussion, Mr. Goolsby?
Are you going to consider several sessions, or do you think it's one event?
Well, we'll discuss that, but we'll figure that out, because I think your point is well taken. Do it in segments. That might be more practical for us. I remember when we first looked at these codes years ago, probably 12 or so or more years ago, we had considerable discussion before we adopted it as well. And I think this is the time to take a look at that again in that perspective. So, motion's made, second. Do we have any more discussion? Kristen, call for the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Volle.
Aye.
Motion passes. Lots of concerns, and we're gonna take another look at it. So thanks,
That'll be a
everybody.
public meeting, sir.
Okay. Let's move on then to our, let's close our business for this evening. So now it's time for our city manager's comments. Start.
I have nothing to report, sir, thank you.
Okay. Start with Mr. Goolsby.
Oh, thank you, sir. I do want to say that there was a lot of research that, that went into the creation of those codes. There's a lot of people that put a lot into those. I deal with them every day. Oh, he just left. I do look for the most cost-effective way to do my buildings for the best of my clients. There's a lot going on with that, but I'm going to keep with that. Sorry, guys. The forum was, I enjoyed the forum. That was fun to listen to. It was well done. You're a great moderator. Appreciate you doing that. It reminded me of when Mr. Shelby and I were running, and they had it at Four Kings, and it was, oh good Lord, somebody. It wasn't that set up. It was just a bunch of people asking a bunch of questions individually. It scared me to death. Thank you all for your emails pouring out with the research that y'all have done on this as well. I think it's going to be an interesting next few meetings or however that occurs to get everybody up to speed on it, and I can't wait to sit back and watch. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I wanted to agree, Mr. Hughley, you did a great job with the forum. Thank you so much. Speaking of people, contractors, plumber, can you hear me? A plumber, when he came to my house, he told me that Jackie went out to the office and talked to all the plumbers and kind of told them where things were coming from. He was really impressed with that. Also, we opened the laundromat. We did the ribbon cutting at the laundromat. That is a laundromat. That's exactly how they should have been all along. Very nice. And that's all.
It's called Mod Wash. Dick?
Thanks, Mr. Good. I want to thank you all for coming tonight and for all your care and concern, and we do listen to you. And we try to do our best to do everything that we can. Well, happy Easter's coming up, so I hope you all have a happy Easter. And I have one question for Mr. Lansman. Do you have any idea when they're going to open up that second left turn lane under?
Kenny Harper.
Yeah. Are they planning to in the new fiscal year?
He's nodding, yes.
Fiscal year 24, maybe? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The grand ribbon cutting for the Red Horse Park is this week, Thursday, correct? I think that I really, if you've had a chance to get out there, they've got some fit pods out there for exercise and things. So at the grand opening, I'll challenge the council for a 1 mile race around there. We'll see how we go there. So we'll see how. So dress accordingly, and we'll hit the different fits. And Councilman.
I want 9/10 of a mile.
Well, I was going to let you be the scorekeeper. I was going to let you be the scorekeeper. And you're the poor scorekeeper who loses. Anyway, that's look forward to seeing that one. I had Councilman Volle and I had the honor of representing Universal City last Saturday for the Tri-City baseball opening, and I had the honor of pitching the first ball. And they were so appreciative of all of the work that Randy Lunsman and his crew has done out there. They started mentioning them all by name. Keeping the park and the ball fields up to date. I think it's only appropriate that the opening pitch for 2022 go to you and your staff out there. With that being said, it was a great little debate we had the other day, but John, I have one question. Being the moderator, I know you could have gotten one more question out about waste management.
Watch the next door app, you're gonna see that.
William?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I really do want to point out that from my perspective, I am one person of 7 up here. The council is a body. It's a group of people bringing each individual's experiences and their knowledge together on a panel to discuss the events that are brought in front of, or the items that are brought in front of us. For us to try and figure out those items prior to, well, there's only so far we can go. We can pick up the phone and call the city prior to if we have any questions, but really, you know, using tonight in the code, using Byrd, all of Baird's questions is a great example. I don't build buildings. I build networks. I do information technology. I do IT budgets. I don't build buildings. I have very little knowledge when it comes to how to build a building, how to read building codes. I depend on my fellow council member to bring his knowledge. If we were talking about technology, I'm sure that everybody would throw their phone down here and say, please get me on the internet. But each one of us brings a different experience. Each one of us brings a different life experience, our experience in the city, our job experience, and that's what makes this body work, is that each one of us brings our experience together to discuss the items. And I think that's really important. If all of us were, you know, did the same job, worked in the same realm, had the same experiences, we would spend a lot of time spinning our wheels trying to figure out, you know, how things need to be addressed. I'll get off my soapbox. I do want to say that I very much appreciate code compliance and the permitting process. I'm going to be the outlier. I don't find a problem with it. I've actually found problems where I've had contractors come in, start cutting a hole in my roof, and I ask them, where's your permit? And they go, we don't need one. And I said, yeah, you do. You're cutting a hole in my roof. I want somebody to come by and make sure your work is right. I don't want a storm to come in and have a pool of water on my second floor because you cut a hole in my ceiling and didn't do a job right. Same thing with a water softener I put in. They tried to do it without having a permit there. I came down here, they had to go out and get a plumber to actually get a permit because they didn't have a plumber's license. And then I was happy to have inspection group come by and verify that everything was installed properly. I feel the same way about the houses around me. The house behind me right now, I watch every night, and half of that kitchen is torn out. I see electrical wires hanging down. I have no idea whether they're permitting or not. I have no idea who's going to check and make sure that work is done right. I sure hope it's done right because it's close enough to my house that if it catches on fire, it's probably going to affect my house. So I depend on codes, code compliance, permitting, inspections to make sure that people are taking care of their houses around my house and every one of my neighbors' houses so that we're all protected from bad work being done. Because I know there are plenty of contractors who will come in here and do work and not get a permit and maybe cut corners. And that's just I've seen too many fires. I've been to too many fires and seen that happen. And it's all, you know, somebody wired an electrical, put a light in. Oh, I'm just going to run this over here. So sorry, I know I'm on the soapbox. So, but it really is just to thank the hard work, and I know it's a thankless job, and I know it's a difficult job, and I know it's, you know, I've had to wait. I had a hole in my front yard, and I needed to get the plumbing inspected done before they filled the hole in. But at least I know the water that's coming into my house is clean and potable and safe for my family. And the last thing is, since waste management is always front and center, thank you to the staff. I was up here a couple times last week, and the phones were ringing off the hook. And I heard multiple people having conversations, gathering info, putting somebody on hold, getting on the phone with Waste Management, finding out why somebody's trash wasn't picked up. I cannot express the amount of time and energy that the city staff, which is not a huge staff, has put into making sure that this transition goes as smooth as possible to address items that have come up. You know, a street where half the houses are on their alleys, half of their houses, their garages on the back, so they get alley pickup, and half of them have street pickup. And Waste Management picked up the street, didn't pick up the alley. Well, we found out that there was a contractor blocking the street, so Waste Management couldn't get back there. But they were gonna come back the very next day to take care of that problem. That is, that's amazing for me to watch, to see you guys do that. And I know that's on top of every single thing else you guys are doing down here. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I like what Councilmember Shelby said, that it's a phenomenal amount of work that's been done. It's a thankless job, but they've been really responsive, and they've been very honest and open and pleasant with all of you that have called with your just kind of questions about it. A couple of quick items first. Last Wednesday, you may have heard some pretty heavy noise with with an aircraft. I don't know if you heard that. That was an F-35 doing a demo at the AETC commander's reception. And he wanted to show and tell the air power. And so there were two F-35s there, only one flew. But if you heard some pretty loud noises around there, that was because he was show and tell of your air power and its action. So fantastic. And the only other commercial I will give you is that the air show is the 23rd and 24th of April at Randolph. It will be probably the most spectacular air show they've ever had. It's the 75th anniversary show. It's going to feature the Thunderbirds and many other flying demonstrations, starting at about 9 in the morning until about 6 in the afternoon. So if you want to hear and watch and see airplanes, you're going to see them on Saturday. If you want to catch the T-Birds in their demo, go out a couple of locations around University City on Friday afternoon and see the Thunderbirds in action for free, just like you'll have when you go on base. So again, thank you everyone for your participation this evening. Your comments are noted. Please understand that. We're all thrilled to see people here again this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. And it is now 8:22 and this meeting is adjourned.